start in a minute. Yeah, we're recording. We're on.
Okay. So, we want to go around the room again?
Sure. I will open the door and then introduce myself.
This is why they try to edit the tape, because it has all these gaps where,
Yeah.
you know, what's it doing? Just, you know, it's a picture of this. So, you were at the movie.
Yeah.
You were at the movie. Were you at the movie? No. No. Were you at the movie? I don't remember you. Okay.
You met probably before?
Oh,
You too?
no.
No?
This
We
is
just met a minute ago. Hey, how are you?
Hey.
Sorry, probably.
No, you're quite all right. You're just in time to introduce yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Valentina. I worked with Ray first in New Orleans for a month, and I'm very happy he came in here and he agreed to do this training for us for the campaign we are leading, actually, for this massive rally on the 8th of March and possibly what comes after the 8th of March.
Hi, I'm Elena Yordanova. I'm working about Roma community, Roma youth, and that's all.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm Stoyo. I was at the movie and I work for Действие. That is the LGBT organization. It's one of the
Partners here.
Yeah.
I'm Thea, also got the chance to see the movie,
Good.
and I'm also working with Tasty.
I'm Denitsa, lawyer, and I work for Daisy.
Did we meet last year?
I think so, yeah.
I think so.
Yeah,
Now that you know, now that you're talking, I think we met. I can't
Yeah.
remember when and how, but we
Yeah.
definitely met.
Yeah.
Okay. So she knows everything. So, you know, she goes back.
I'm Vanetta, I'm also part of Rathke, and just so part of the movie.
But I can hook you up. You got access right there at the house. I think.
Yeah.
Just we can watch it on your computer. Except for those last 3 minutes that you know the perfectionist says weren't translated, but I think it was even less than that. So here's the scope I was given today. Is that I heard y'all did a significant March rally last year about the same around the same time in March, or
It was November 26th.
November 26th, so 5 months ago, and then you have something else coming March 8th.
That's it.
So if you could first describe what you're hoping for March 8th, and then what we thought we would talk about is, okay, depending on what the goals and objectives or whatever comes out of what you believe will happen March 8th, then where do you take it from there in terms of follow-up campaigns? So what are our hopes for March 8th?
Well, I just have a hope that we will get more people. I hope the same number or bigger than.
Which in that number would be what?
It was 1,000 people we were, if you remember. So I hope you have more. As last year on March 8th, we were like probably 200 or 300 people only. And mainly, probably half of the people, or more than half, were only the people from the gay community.
And so you want a diverse crowd. And last year you had, what would you say?
2 or 3, I don't know.
Between 2 and 3 cars.
That,
Okay, and mainly LGBT?
At least half of them were
Oh, there were some women.
Oh yeah, LGBT women.
Women, those are women, okay. So, and is there any special theme for this particular March 8th? What is that?
like, who are we, or?
Them.
I don't know.
It's called Equality is the New Tradition.
Okay.
That's just the
That's the slogan?
Yeah.
Equality is the new tradition? That's a good slogan. Okay. And as I understand, that slogan is an attempt to offset the fact that what we're doing is not seen as traditional.
Yes,
Yeah.
the main
We're
argument
saying, by God, equality is traditional. I got that, okay? Other goals or perspectives on what we're hoping for on March 8th? So 1,000 people, we've got a slogan. Where are we going to be doing this? What's the location? What's the venue?
The venue is a march. It's actually a march. It starts from the triangle of power, which is the space in between the presidency, the cabinet, where the cabinet is holding, and the second house of the parliament.
Okay.
So we
Near the
start
statue with the guy on the horse?
That's the
near
second
the
place.
Saint Sofia statue.
near the statue of Saint Sofia. We're starting at the statue of Saint Sofia,
Oh, okay.
just behind Sheraton and Zoom. Or no, we haven't passed through there. Whatever.
I may have been there last year.
Yeah, but a lot of rallies start from there.
And where does it end?
And it passes through the statue with the horse, and it ends at Wolfmoss, which is also a symbolic place for rallies.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then is there something happening at the ending? There are people speaking from the...
Yeah, we'll be having speeches at the beginning and at the end.
Okay.
And in the middle. This is what we plan.
And people are speaking on this theme or about they're speaking about their organizational program, or how are you working that?
We have several really good chairs, Toyo.
So we don't
Because
have
you
a,
draft,
with next meeting we will fix the people who are speaking, we don't have them yet. But the idea is that the committee is aiming for like a diverse crowd. So, and we have a list of a list of many how it is demands.
Okay.
The idea is to build a platform that is including all, but it's not focused on one issue. It's reflecting the overall fight for the
And are the demands within this theme, or the demands are what's responsive to the various groups, or what?
Did we settle up on the list of the demands, because there were some internal fights in the committee about the demands?
We have settled, we just have to finalize. But okay. I mean, the idea is that they are reflecting the diversity, and they're including the goals for each and every member, but they're kind of the ones that we settled on. So I don't know what's the question, but
And
the question was whether these demands match the equality.
Yes.
do they meet this? And then the second question, I mean, where I'm going with this, your business, whatever the demands are, is to the degree there's clarity on the demands, it makes it easier to talk about what campaigns might come out of this March 8th event where we've made these demands. So, for example, do the demands have to do at all with working conditions for people, or education, or daycare, or...
They're like, are we making demands on behalf of the медицински сестри?
Of the nurses? No, we are going to write a support letter for the nurses. But some of the demands
Also was
are also in
of
the
the healthcare practitioners, which is scheduled for the 1st of March, but that's a separate thing.
Okay, so that's...
So we are just
It was
doing
a
the,
question to them because
we are only writing a letter of support.
yeah, but we have also included feminized, how do you say, raising the quality and pay
Feminized
of
employment.
feminized professions,
Okay.
which is in which nurses are listed. So I don't know, but maybe if we understand.
I'm just gonna abbreviate that as women's jobs, but, you know, that's-
Okay.
we'll fix it later. It's just quicker for... Any other?
Combating gender-based violence.
And is that, we're talking about hate crimes, we're talking about domestic abuse there, what's under that, what's in that basket?
It's providing shelters, professional support, fighting domestic violence, education against gender-based violence, and
Maybe including gender-based violence in the legislation, because it's
Is there current legislation proposed, or this is something we're trying to get proposed?
There is a law which is active, which is a special law against against domestic violence. But there was an attempt to pass another bill which is more systematically treats the problem and includes not only some measures in the penalty code, but also includes how it relates to funding about those shelters. It also encompasses psychological help. It also encompasses prevention, education, a set of measures, which was more systemic as an approach. But this one didn't pass, and it was declared unconstitutional by the Constitutional Court. So we don't know if we can go on with this more systematic approach, or we need to just push on the small issues like introducing domestic violence as a term and gender-based violence as a term into the penal code.
And of the base that's coming to the rally, whose issue is that primary? Who feels that's their most important issue?
Well,
What's
the
the
women's
base for it?
organizations definitely feel that domestic violence is the most important issue.
And there are women who are suffering domestic violence that are leading this campaign?
No,
So we're just advocating for people that
we're just advocating it.
I'm just making a note. Okay, so I got you. So that's that issue. So I've got employment, jobs, hate and violence, any other big?
I mean, socio-economic issues as a whole is one thing, and the other thing is that we didn't think that we should rally for that as well, but we included one of the main issues to be defense of reproductive rights, because recently we have seen an attack on that. So we are forced also to remember
Okay.
that this is under threat as well, apparently.
And are there current laws on the books about this, or no? Or there's an attack on those laws, or what do you?
There is a spike of publications against abortions.
But what's the legal situation?
Abortions are legal, and the large portion of society is in favor. It's just that there is a growing conservative threat, so we want to be like.
But it is legal, and there are clinics that you can access?
Yeah.
And for a long time, so it's.
So for example, in the United States, the right campaign is to eliminate access and to make it, even though it is technically legal, to make it so that doctors have to be, certified by certain hospitals, so that in some states, there might be, in all of Texas, 3 clinics for a state with, that's twice the size of all of Bulgaria, so that's what I'm asking. So you have the law, you have clinics, you have access, it's just the right's not happy about this for religious or moral or just
to make sure.
general principles,
Yeah.
just put women down. Okay, gotcha.
There is another issue which was
Yeah, good.
raised during the last rally in November, which is how power and how representatives of power treat Roma women, because there were hate speech against Roma women, and we addressed that issue also back then.
Is that part of hate speech here, or is that something different?
I would separate it from domestic violence because, hate speech and domestic violence is different.
And for us, one of the main issues that arise just now is that basically the Constitutional Court and the other Supreme Courts, because we have 3, what the US Supreme Court is, in Bulgaria it's 3 different courts, and
3 ways you can lose.
yes, and we did lose in the second one now, and effectively they dismissed the term gender, which means that first there's no gender-based violence, there's no gender as a term, and there is no separation between your sex and your social role. But what it translates for the LGBT community is that trans rights effectively stopped, because now they have a new judgment, how to say, a new
Decision.
decision that
No judgment.
bars trans people from changing legal gender with the argumentation that gender does not exist, so you're born with one sex, you are stuck with this sex for the rest of your life, so we fight trans rights. And for us, I think if we're talking problems, for me the biggest problem is to communicate what gender is and why is it important not only for LGBTI people, but for people as a whole.
Gotcha. Okay, so this is, I got a clear enough understanding of what you're trying to do on March 8th, right? We can always add to it, but I'm just trying to make sure, at least I understand
Yeah.
what we're trying to do here. So, let's look at campaigns. So your demands are important, and these are, you know, the issues or whatever. Campaigns are important to organizations as organizing tools. So partly what you try to do with a campaign, converting issues into campaigns, is build a base or build an organization. So if you're trying to build an organization, that'd be one question. And if you're trying to build a base as well as an organization, or separately from that organization, that'd be another organizing problem you'd be trying to sort out. So, which is it?
Can we also add a coalition of organizations? Because we are actually working in a coalition.
Great.
I'm not
And
sure it's.
Do these
very
organizations
effective.
have a base, or are they all advocacy organizations?
None of the organizations has a base.
What do you mean?
The people.
Members,
Only we
people
have
who
a
they
base.
can,
Yeah.
you know, if organization one, I know they're good to put 100 people in a rally.
Mm.
Organization B, I know they're good for 50. Organization C, I can count on them for 300. A
No.
base.
No,
No,
Nobody has a base.
no.
only we have a base, but we don't know how many will come.
And when you think about your base here, what do you believe is your base? Separate from,
200 to 300, yes.
okay, so that's a base. And
That's an optimistic
She's
estimate.
very optimistic, but yeah, okay.
But let's say.
no,
that
it's, look, I'm from America, we're the land of optimism. I bet it's 302.
No. Come on.
I've
This
already
is
been
only
accused
that
once of,
the-
oh, you Americans are so
Promise.
optimistic. This is what I hear every day in the Balkans.
Oh, no, it's actually, if you see these pictures here, this is a rally that they still mainly organize, and this is a good estimation of how many people we can get. These people. This one is
Yeah,
organized for 2
Not
hours.
this one.
3 hours. In 3 hours, yeah.
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 This
So
is-
200-300 for 3 hours. It's
I
enough.
think you were right the first time, weren't you?
Yeah.
And what was, when you turned out that number of people, what was, you turned them out in 2 or 3 hours, you said?
Mm.
Yeah, but the
So-
Constitutional Court said that gender is illegal.
Mm.
That's the day
So
when
the
they.
rapid response capacity.
Mm.
Yeah.
So outsiders who read reports of that action or saw it on your social media or was it in the press at all? Was it in news media or TV or newspapers or
The event itself or the decision of the court?
the event itself?
The event itself got in the media only the next day.
And the
No,
next
it
day,
was the same day. They came to the media.
so if I were Joe or Jane Doe out there, I could have seen that you, in response, could turn out 200 or 300 people. So my perception would be your base, that you do have a base.
No.
Uh-huh,
That you can
okay.
respond as opposed
Okay.
to, you know, me just standing there
No.
talking in front of a mic and saying, oh my God, this is terrible. And then other political and public figures might say, okay, there is a base. It wasn't tens of thousands, but it was 300.
Okay.
So that's a base. So in looking at a base, okay, so there are various levels of commitment from a base.
Okay.
So a you know, a base that's paying membership dues and electing leaders, that's obviously a little bit more of a committed base than people who, but a base that you can call out for defense or, you know, or attack or whatever is still a base, and that's important. It gives you something more that you're speaking with and for people, not just for people, and that makes a difference. And it also makes a difference in terms of potential leadership, people who are affected by those issues, who can speak to their issue, not you speaking for their issue, right? So, in reaction to that court decision, were any of the spokespeople people who were directly affected?
Yes.
So that also makes it more powerful, doesn't it? Okay. And politically, that's a question that's called voice, whether or not you're able to create voice, which is one step towards building power. If people don't have a voice, it's easier to make them powerless. If we can build a voice through organization. Okay, so that's what a base is. If you don't, and so, what's the difference between having a base and just being an advocate? And I know we're still talking about campaigns, but we're just going around the house to do that. So environmentalists are classic advocates. You could say because trees can't talk and animals don't know language that we understand. Environmentalists often believe they don't really need a base of people because they're speaking for good and true. Climate will all be dead, or forests that are being destroyed. So they, you know, there are a lot of advocates there. Some environmental groups do have a base, which makes them more effective. But many groups, many NGOs are advocates. And their voice in some ways is often different. So in this coalition of organizations, how many organizations are involved?
9.
9, okay. And you have a base and you're saying the rest largely don't have a base?
I don't know about the Roma community because also they're able to gather. But do you think maybe that you can estimate a base?
Maybe. From Roma standing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because for sure women organizations do not have a base, but Roma organizations.
Are there Roma women's organizations that will be showing up here for March 8th?
We don't have Roma.
So let's put the question of a base there as a question mark. So some Roma organizations have a base.
Yeah, some.
But they're a member of the committee, it's just that they're not specifically for Roma women, it's just that,
But they're part of the 9?
yes.
Yes.
And what organization is that?
The
Sofia,
standing
no,
front
Roma
committee.
standing conference.
Oh, okay. I know that group now. And what are they committing to do to show up at March 8th? What's the number they've committed to put on the
We
street with
never
us?
ask these questions.
Huh?
What do you mean, we never ask these questions. We just hope that people will come.
Well,
But
whoa,
come on,
turn off the camera.
what do you mean by,
I mean, if you're a committee putting together a rally, you need to ask all the organizations how many people they're committing that they will show up.
It's more than logical as a question. I know we
Yeah,
never
yeah.
asked it.
Yeah, it's perfectly
whether people will
logical.
come or not come on?
Perfectly logical.
As an organizer, I can tell you that we never really know. But when we're organizing something, we kind of know based on how we evaluate people's commitments in terms of what they say. I mean, there's never a rally or a meeting that I've ever put together where I didn't ask people, okay, so how many people is the standing committee of Roma going to show up for at March 8th? And
Can you ask such a question?
absolutely.
No, in the
We
in
can
the
ask,
Roma
but,
standing committee.
How to say?
Say it.
They
I'm
might
not
lie.
sure what will be the answer.
What would be the answer?
Yeah.
it almost, given that you don't usually ask, and I know this is about campaigns, not rally planning, but even if they lie to you, you can hold, I mean, the next time, if they say they're gonna produce 100 and they only produce 33, that's a different conversation the next time about, hey, can't you, last time you said you'd do 100, you're shamed. You only produced 33, I mean.
Is what you're talking about, it's a question, it's not a statement.
Yeah.
So you're basically connecting the people that are organizing the rally with the commitment of how many people they're gonna bring?
Any organization, well, it's all building blocks, right? So you're hoping social media, put out the word, posters, phone calls, you're hoping you attract people who saw last year and are excited to come back March 8th, right? But you still start, if you want 1,000 people, if you start knowing you've got commitments on 400,
Yeah.
then your turnout plan, as we call it as organizers, is to try to get somewhere, if you want another 600, you're trying to get somewhere between 1,200 and 1,800 yeses. People that you think, you're trying to do outreach to that number in order to get at least half to a third of that outreach to show up. And if people are committing to 400, as you push them, you're trying to make sure their list to get that 400 is at least twice as many. Because sometimes the yeses are soft, sometimes people don't know how to evaluate commitments. You tell me, hey, be there March 8th, I say, yeah. You still, as rally organizers, have to say, well, that's not a real yes. I mean, that's probably the way it's not going to show up, or Facebook is a good example. Somebody says, you put out the rally page on Facebook and 2,000 people say they're coming. Well, that no longer means anything on Facebook. But you probably have a number that you know that it means. Because you've done other events. So what's that number?
Yeah, the people that say that they're going on Facebook, maybe 1/3.
That high.
I think but our events are small, so it's not that big of an outreach. We have 200 people going, and then we know that 70 will show up.
Okay,
50.
that's what's key. As long as you have your own way of judging what the pool is and what number really comes out, you have a way to determine what's going to happen. And you need that. I mean, you don't want to just fly blind. We got sort of on the sidetrack here, but yeah, let's just say for the sake of argument, you do need to ask every one of the 9 groups who are supposedly coordinating this what they're bringing to the party. You were doing something at your house, you'd want to know who's bringing food, who's bringing the wine. You wouldn't just say, hey, come on, unless, this was something, I don't know, maybe you would say just come on, whatever. But if you're bringing something you want everybody to participate, you need to ask them what they're bringing. And in this case, you need to ask them if they're bringing people. So for the Standing Roma Committee, we want them to bring a significant number of people to establish that they are, in fact, as they claim they are, 100 organizations part of the Standing Roma Committee, that they really are representing the Roma people. And if they're not willing to bring a couple hundred people to stand for Roma women, that's a conversation we need to have with them, just as an example. Because that's a group, I've learned in the last couple of days, really is trying to build a base. And this is a perfect opportunity to have a conversation with them about how you build a base, right? So I don't know enough about the other organizations, I don't want to get, into this, but here's part of the question. Depending on what kind of organization you're building, this rally is to help increase their base, and the campaigns that come out of the rally would be about building an additional base and power, right?
So use the rally as a way to increase the base.
And to build power, right? Okay. So the reason you do a public demonstration, and you all know this, you're just not saying it, is to send a message to the target about who and what you represent. I mean, petition signatures, you know, all of us complaining at our house, that's not voice, but you're trying to send a message because you want it not to be 300 or 400 last year, you want it to be 1,000. You're sending a message that we're going to keep escalating these numbers until we win. So you need to either get on the program and co-opt us, or we're just going to get stronger and stronger until we take you out. So the campaigns, okay, I know people are skeptical, but you with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Say something. You don't want to say anything?
So, some of these campaigns are more tuned to advocacy unless you have a real base that's willing to speak and act collectively around these issues. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So, domestic violence, for example, is hard to do a public campaign with the base because it's a private crime often. Which is not to say it's not a huge, huge issue, or that there shouldn't be great work about that. It's just that in a campaign, you need 3 elements. And to abbreviate, I'll just say, you know, so you need it to be specific, immediate, and in English, realizable.
What realizable?
Means winnable. Something you can win.
Oh.
So, in poverty now, I mean, I organize low to moderate income families. That is a huge issue for us. In poverty now. But if I said that was the campaign and that was the only thing we were doing, is saying in poverty now, that's not a campaign. Because unless I make it more specific, am I talking about housing, am I talking about welfare benefits, am I talking about health access, and then even make that more specific, it's not good health now, it's something specific about health. It's just as you're saying here about equalization of women's pay or health care givers, you're talking about whether or not you want equal pay for specific women because the laws, I mean, I don't know enough about the law, but you'll tell me. Immediate is something that forces action now, that we have to act now because this is urgent, this is important, this is something that has to be done now. And that's how we build a sense that people take collective action. It can't wait. It's not March 8th, we'll do this again in a year. It's, you have to roll out of this March 8th to something that sees an action by the end of March, and sees something in April, and sees something in, you know, there's a regular diet. This won't stop. This is immediate. This has to happen. And you want to try to define the campaign in order to build a base and power so that there's something you can win. Power has to concede something to your demand. So once again, that's the problem. If I was organizing in poverty now, they could do nothing. They could say, this little thing over here, which is not something we demanded, is what they're willing to concede. So, what are examples? Okay. In trying to figure out campaigns, we often look for what we call handles, a place where you can grab an issue. And the law is a handle, a law particularly that exists in the books but isn't enforced is a handle. Sometimes we can find a regulation or an administrative, position or things of this nature that give us a handle to be able to try to push on that particular thing to force action or negotiation. Sometimes a handle would be in New York City in the last week, Amazon, which is one of the richest companies in the world, was just pushed out of New York City on a big expansion because they wanted $3 billion worth of tax benefits. That was a handle. They were asking for taxpayers' money for the richest corporation in the world and the richest single individual in the world. That was a problem. And then it turned out, secondly, the company Amazon didn't pay any taxes last year across the whole company. In fact, the US government is giving them a tax refund of $112 million. So these, in the macro sense, are big handles in terms of pushing. There may have been other reasons why some people didn't want Amazon. They thought rents were going to be increased. They didn't think that jobs were going to help people. They, thought they didn't like the way Amazon would impact in some cases, unions, well, in all cases, unions were opposed to Amazon coming in because they wouldn't agree to union neutrality and to allow unions. They're a very anti-union company. But they didn't go after Amazon and just say, you have to be union. Don't come in unless you agree to be union, even though that was really what they wanted. That was their objective. But they were able to use a handle saying, why are we letting an anti-union company come in that we're paying $3 billion in lost revenue on when we're desperate for money, for housing, for health, for subways, for everything in New York City, and they're not paying any taxes. They're a bunch of bums. That's a corrupt situation. So you look for some way in which you can argue politically that you're